In this screencast, we'll talk about the corporate context in which I want you to understand the development of U.S. media policy. Last week I asked you to watch The Corporation, and in that documentary, as well as in the book that it is based on, Joel Bakan draws the conclusion that by the end of the 20th century, the corporation had become the world's dominant institution. That dominance extends into the mainstream media, and that means that the corporate media control our national dialogue about the proper place of the corporation in a democratic society. In fact, about the only place that you'll find a serious critique of the corporation within the mainstream media is in the editorial cartoon. Cartoonists like Joel Pett, Dwayne Powell, and Matt Worker are three of the most relentless critics of excess corporate power. Their editorial cartoons take on issues that we should be able to depend upon the mainstream media to take on, but the corporate interest underlying those media keeps that from happening. So Barley's article on corporations, democracy, and the public good explores some questions that are of extreme importance to us as we examine the American media and as we look at the policies that give us the media that we have. In this article, Barley argues that the shift to an organizational or a corporate society has in fact jeopardized our democratic institutions. He reminds us that a representative democracy is a form of democracy founded on the exercise of popular sovereignty by the people's elected representative. Voters choose in free, secret, multi-party elections representatives to act in their interest, but not necessarily according to their wishes, but with enough authority to exercise initiative in the face of changing circumstances. Add to that, then, a definition of the corporation which you've explored in some detail in the process of watching the documentary The Corporation. But Barley turns to the OED's definition, in which we find that the corporation is a body corporate legally authorized to act as a single individual, an artificial person created by royal charter, prescription, or act of the legislature, and having authority to preserve certain rights in perpetual succession. Ambrose Bierce, in his Devil's Dictionary, gave us a somewhat more telling definition when he described the corporation as an ingenious device for obtaining individual profit without individual responsibility. And of course, if you think of this in the context of what you remember of the documentary, you can easily connect this to the film's claim that the corporation is an externalizing machine. Barley's thesis is that in our republic, people are now separated from their representatives by an asteroid belt of organizations, and among the most powerful of these are corporations and their trade associations. We have to remember in this context that our early history was in fact marked by a pervasive distrust of corporations. The Boston Tea Party was as much a protest against the excessive power of the East India Company as it was against the British government. And we have a tendency to reduce this act of civil disobedience to a protest simply against taxation. And it was a much larger issue than that, because the people truly resented the power that these corporate monopolies, such as the East India Company, exercised over their daily lives. Many of our nation's most revered presidents have warned us against the power of the corporation. Madison wrote to a friend at one point, "Incorporated companies with proper limitations and guards may in particular cases be useful, but they are at best a necessary evil only. Monopolies and perpetuities are objects of just abhorrence." We've come to think of the corporation as a natural part of our economic world. That's a far cry from Madison's view of a necessary evil only. In his 1833 State of the Union address, Andrew Jackson said of the problem of the corporation that in this point of the case the question is distinctly presented whether the people of the United States are to govern through representatives chosen by their unbiased suffrages, or whether the money and power of a great corporation are to be secretly exerted to influence their judgment and control their decisions. Abraham Lincoln recognized that as a result of the war, corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. Working upon the prejudices of the people, I should point out, sounds very much like Gramsci's theory of hegemony, in which the media is one of those three institutions, along with the church and education, that acts, if you will, upon the prejudices of the people, that works to make the state of the corporation as we know it now to seem natural and unchangeable. Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his farewell address, warned that in the councils of government we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. That phrase, an alert and knowledgeable citizenry, hopefully calls to mind for you that intellectual self-defense that we talked about previously. Barley looks at the context in which the growth of corporate power occurs, one part of which is the development of the concept of corporate personhood as corporations laid claim to 14th Amendment protections that were originally, remember, designed to ensure that newly freed African Americans would be protected, not corporations. And Barley, of course, reminds us that corporations brought far more suits than did African Americans. If you want to explore this issue more fully, I would recommend you take a look at Hartman's Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People, and How You Can Fight Back. Barley looks at several specific instances in which the corporate profit motive is at odds with the public good. So next time we'll take a look at the 3 ways in which corporate influence can undermine the concept of representative democracy and thereby the public good. And we'll do that in the context of the 3 specific examples Barley uses to support his thesis. So until then, here are some recommended books if you would like to explore the issues associated with the corporation and a democratic society. I would recommend you take a look at Corton's When Corporations Rule the World. The role of corporations in supporting the Nazi regime is an interesting case study in how corporations lack any sense of nationalism, any sense of national loyalty. And finally, I'd recommend Lugar's Corporate Power, American Democracy, and the Automobile Industry. And some food for thought in this context. Fighting Bob La Follette once said, "The cure for what ails democracy is more democracy." And if you have never heard of Senator La Follette, blame your history books. He ties for first with Henry Clay in Porter's 1987 survey of historians, ranking senators based on accomplishments while in office and long-term impact on history. Goodbye for now.